Welcome to Prep Life. Let's get right into it. Let's talk about this backwards optic thing on the 300 blackout. Thank you so much for leaving your feedback on that and your criticism. I find it really pretty insane that people get so, especially men. I expect men just to bear themselves a little bit more controlled, but how outraged and emotionally charged men were that I would dare put an optic on backwards. But the strategy as defined by John worked perfectly. Because an Easter egg is supposed to, for the people who identify it, start driving engagement and traffic. And you know what that does, guys? Especially on a video about the ATF and firearms that would normally be suppressed. It gets the algorithm to favor that content, and it did so because we have hundreds of thousands of views as well as over 6,000 comments. Now, most of the comments aren't focused on the optic, but the optic certainly drove a lot of traffic. And I think it's comical that people would be like, how incompetent this person is. Me, it's my firearm that I teach classes with, that I use frequently. So you can't actually use the optic if it's on backwards because you wouldn't see a dot. So, of course, that was intentional. But, the point is a lot of men are charged by this, but they did exactly what we predicted. They started talking about it. And guys, I didn't even know this was a thing, but apparently it is a thing. Like, you want to cause controversy and favor yourself in the algorithm to get the message out, do something like that, and it works. Even guys who are haters of us put posts, put comments, and then more people reached out to me about that stuff, and I'm like, man, this is actually good for engagement, and it's not so controversial. I mean, if you're so outraged that I would put the thing on my gun backwards and that's the worst of it, then so be it. I mean, wow, you got me. But we did get the message out. And my big fear with this whole thing with the ATF is many Americans who don't follow gun culture aren't going to understand what this means for them in 120 days. If you don't tell your congressmen, your senators, your elected officials, your sheriff, you're not going to have skin in the game. This was not a law. This was a law, the National Firearms Act of like 1930 something. I think it was like 34. And then a new ruling to that law. So they didn't go to Congress to get this passed. They just said, this is a new ruling. This used to be legal. No longer is it legal. In fact, if you have even a little bit of surface area because you think it's a pistol that could potentially be braced on your body, that could mean it's an SBR. And you could be a felon. Like 10 years in prison type stuff. And if you have an optic on that firearm and it's a pistol, but it looks like you would get that optic or find that optic when you're shouldered on that, they could deem it not a pistol and they could deem it an SBR, and then you'd be in trouble. Now, for the justification of many ATF people who work for the ATF, including the organization put out, we're not going to enforce this, but we're just going to create this so people can get it registered. And you have 120 days to do so. Don't be so fast to do that. There are going to be a lot of lawsuits. There is likely to be an overturning of this. I hope the whole entire National Firearms Act gets overturned. The fact we can't have suppressors on firearms because we think it's a silencer. The fact that you can't have a stabilization brace on a pistol because it's more concealable. Like, what? 90% of all violent acts in gun violence is used with a semi-automatic pistol. Like, so what are we even doing, guys? This is ridiculous. Moving on in the news, speaking of firearms control, most states dictate the gun control measures, and we don't look at that as Second Amendment infringement, but I certainly do. Most people who are in those states just follow the letter of the law, but most sheriff's departments, most counties in those states won't even enforce those radical laws on the state books. So like if I was in California, which I started Fieldcraft Survival in Northern California in a small town of Jackson and Nyon, Cal, beautiful area, Amador County, the sheriff's like, we're not enforcing anything. So I'm safe in the county, but I'm a felon outside the county. That's problematic for American citizens. So you should, at every level, be writing your local representatives to make the case. You can go to fieldcraftsurvival.com where I put one of those letters that all you do is copy and paste that letter. guys, don't just copy and paste it. You actually have to, where it says your name, you actually have to write in your name. A couple guys have done that. I think it's funny, but in California a few days ago, 6 people were murdered in Central California by what law enforcement officers are suspecting is cartel violence. That has existed in our country for forever. And we are seeing these kind of things, these violent acts in the most controlled states in the country. There are 9 states now that have supposedly banned assault rifles and have some stipulation to make it harder for manufacturers, dealers, and law-abiding citizens to own these things, which I think is a constitutional infringement. But we got to fight against it. The fight isn't in the streets. It's through legislation and electing the right officials. I mean, if you voted for the same governor of California, then that's a problem because he's only going to control you more and more and make it more difficult for law-abiding citizens to get the guns that are going to defend them against the criminals that don't follow laws. They don't care about your brace rules. They just do what they do, whether it's a mass shooting or killing 6 people, including a 10-month-old child, executing them. It doesn't matter. They're going to do it anyway. On to mindset and wellness. Let's talk about mindset and wellness. Guys, sleep is imperative. If you're not getting a good night's sleep, which I would categorize as health and wellness, that's going to add up to mental health dilemmas. I haven't been sleeping well. I use CBD and CBN in combination because it helps me sleep. I use it nearly every night. And the nights that I don't use it, man, I don't get good sleep. That sleep and the lack of it can compound itself. You add drugs, alcohol, circumstance, and you're looking at a catastrophe waiting to happen. Get the sleep. Something else that I'm doing in my own life is maintaining fitness by getting back into jiu-jitsu. If you haven't looked into jiu-jitsu, which I've done my entire life, it's weird because I'm going to show up in a local studio as a white belt, which certainly by definition, I am a white belt. As far as like working my way through the ranks of a particular dojo or a lineage, I have to earn my way. But I've been a white, blue, and just kind of done that resetting again and again, really for 20 years. I'm looking forward to starting over and to getting more fit. I also think if you haven't looked into meditation, you should look at meditation because it's a good place to strike a balance between finding your breath and more self-awareness in your body. This disconnection between mind and body creates more stress in our lives. And I had to do meditation last night because I was so anxious about things going on in the near future. And I had to find my breath, and it helped. You know, looking up a YouTube video, downloading the Headspace app, or just going out into nature and collecting your breath and focused on yourself is like taking the Nintendo cartridge out and blowing into it to kind of reset everything to start over. And I think that's important. On EDC, one of the things that we're doing really soon is releasing a new collaboration of EDC belts with a company called Next. I've tried every belt. We've had our own belt that was like plastic with a metal belt buckle that we still have at our Fieldcraft Survival store. But I'm not a fan of it because I don't have the ability to ratchet adjust on the fly. So I can't remember who turned me on to it. It might have been Rob, my marketing guy, who turned me on to the Next Level belts and their ratchet system. But the ability for you to grab the bottom of the buckle, push it, and open the belt and close the belt with one hand on the fly is awesome. It's one of the reasons we're doing a cross collaboration with them. We'll have that one day down the road. I don't know exactly when it is. But I think when you look at EDC, a lot of people would think or define EDC as what you carry and the accessories of what you carry. But it's not just that. EDC is what you wear from head to toe, and all of those things matter. I gave this story in the book I wrote called Prepared. It drops June 6th. You could pre-order it on Amazon. I wrote about one of my bosses in GRS when I was a global response staff officer said to me, Mike, why are you wearing flip-flops? I said, well, I'm off duty. And I should have known better. But the reality is most of the jobs that I've had in the military, you had like an uptime and a downtime. And the downtime, you were able to be down because you had security. You had a base security or fire-based security to be able to help with force protection, where you could check out and put on flip-flops and go to the gym and relax. But in my job overseas as a GRS contractor, I didn't have that luxury. I was the first responder and the first line of defense for everybody on that base. So me being in flip-flops would not facilitate me to be able to shoot, move, and communicate. And that was problematic in the role because force protection was my job. So when I put on my clothes from hat to shoes, everything that I consider is thinking about force protection, especially when I'm with my family. So yeah, would it be nice to put on flip-flops? Sure. And I'm not saying you don't have to put on flip-flops because you need to be prepared always, but I'm saying there's a time and place. If you're taking your kids to Disney World and you're in flip-flops, that's problematic because you're in a very densely populated area where if you had to get off the X and break contact, you would have to move a far distance on foot. And if you have kids like me who are unable to run themselves out of harm's way, I would have to pick them up and move out on foot. So I'm going to pay attention, and everything head to toe matters, including your belt. A couple things to look at when choosing a belt, because I'm not trying to sell you on my belt. It's not even out yet. Rigidity. You want rigidity because you want to be able to hold that metal clip on that holster to be able to lock it into position. Comfort. A lot of people choose these really cool rigid belts, but they're not comfortable. Functionality across different pants. Some jeans that I use are perfect for the rigid belt, but not perfect for all rigid belts. Like I love leather belts because they're great for everyday carry, but I don't like the fact that I have to offset the center belt buckle of that belt so I can put a pistol in appendix carry. That's why I like the next level belt because the buckle is really small and I could just shift it over. I don't have to move it on the outside loops to be able to put a pistol inside of my waistband. In mobility, guys, if you're listening to this right now and you haven't looked at Fieldcraft Survival's giveaway, check it out. Oakley, Premier Body Armor, Black Rifle Coffee Company, Montana Knife Company. We're doing a giveaway where we're giving a 20-liter loaded with all of this stuff, including a Montana Knife. The Montana Knife release that we did with Fieldcraft and Montana Knife sold out in a minute. I think we went through 1,000 units in a minute. The next drop of that, just knock on wood, the next drop in this release is going to be January 26th, which is my birthday, that morning. Stay tuned to Montana Knife Company to see when that release is going to be dropped. But check out our giveaway because we're giving away 2 of those 20 liters, and you just got to follow a couple prompts at Fieldcraft Survival on our Instagram. Also in this is Premier Body Armor's integrated 20-liter 3A body armor. So this, so convenient. Thank you, Krista. This is the 3A body armor that we're going to release. We actually have this for sale in limited quantities, but this goes into the top flap of your 20-liter. What I like better than this is it fits perfectly in the mobility bag. So if I get, man, Krista's Johnny on the spot right now. So I have our mobility bag, right? The whole point of this is it's a panel pack, so it's on the back of the seat, but I could blow out of my vehicle and just disconnect it top and bottom, and now I have a backpack where I could displace with life-saving equipment. The coolest thing about this ballistic panel, and I'm trying to sell you on this because I actually think it's really cool, is if I take off the panel pouches and I apply this, now where I am seated, this covers my vitals because, imagine you sit. This would be behind me on the seat. You could buy 2 if you need more protection, but then I could put the pouches on top of this. Now, when I bug out, I actually have 3A armor, which stops 9, 40, and 45, and 357 on my back as I'm carrying this. And it's not that heavy. We're actually going to do a video soon shooting this. And the new release of my mobility bag, which will be a while, like at the end of the year, will have 3A armor from Premier integrated into the mobility bag, which I'm excited about because we're due for a new version. But having 3A armor in a backpack, I think is like, why not? It's not 10 years ago where if you had to have 3A or some level of protection, you had to carry 20 pounds on your back. Now, with this armor, it's super light and functional. So you could pull this out and carry it wherever you need to, including in your 20-liter and your mobility pack. So super stoked about that. It's limited. It's probably sold out by the time you guys see this and go to the website. But if it is, we will subscribe to the newsletter. You'll be the first to know when it drops back in stock, and we'll make sure we'll have it as part of our offering at Fieldcraft Survival. On the homestead front, let's talk about this Pine World box. I have a Pine World lock box that uses key, physical key, punch key or punch pad, and biometrics to get access to it. The reason that's important is because if you have a weapon in your room that's loaded and you have kids, you want to likely protect that from your children. And my kids, especially my boy, is super curious about what he calls choo-choos. Like everything that's a gun, he is curious about. One thing I started doing at a very young age on purpose is everything in my house, like the guns that are behind me on the table, are out. Now, they're not loaded because like I have this loaded pistol in a holster that's locked into this locking system that you need biometrics for. But I have pistols that are not loaded, like old 1906 single-action revolver sitting on the table. That pistol, not loaded, he's seen. And so it's not like, ooh, it's this new thing. It's kind of like a vase or a book on the table. It's just a thing he sees commonly. So he's not interested in it. Now, as he gets older, he gets more curious. What I decided to do is put my home defense pistol bedside. And so I tell him, don't touch that. And he doesn't touch it typically. But if he did touch it, there's no magazine in it. Now, I know some of you would think this is very controversial. Like, you would never do that. Well, you don't have twin 3-year-old kids. I can tell you right now, if you did, you wouldn't put a loaded gun bedside, and you would figure out a better solution. My solution is I have the loaded pistol on my nightstand, because if I need the firearm and the light to be able to get to it, I have at the same nightstand the ability to access the magazine in the biometrics box. So now I have a loaded smaller handgun in the box, but I have my loaded magazine inside the biometrics box because I've separated ammo and weapon system, because I still want the weapon system because I have a light on it so I could identify or potentially move to a bigger firearm like a AK-47 or 5.56 or 300 Blackout. But I don't want to fully give up my pistol inside of it. And I also want to desensitize my child to, yeah, that's daddy's choo-choo. He keeps it on the nightstand. I know better not to touch it. But if he did touch it, he couldn't harm himself because there's not ammunition inside of it. So that is a strategy that I've used. This Pine World box, look, it's made in China, I think. I don't know the company. I bought it off of Amazon really cheap. You can get that relatively cheap online, but it works. I've used it for now 6 months, did a video on it, and it works for me. There are many different options and considerations. If you're listening to this and you have kids, like 2 3-year-olds, which is like, holy crap, man, these kids are into everything. Leave your comments below so parents who are listening to this can come up with better solutions. One solution is not leaving a loaded firearm in the proximity of access to children. I have tragic stories that I know from friends of mine that lost their children because they thought that hiding the pistol outside of the reach of the child was going to work. Yeah, it works until a certain age. I mean, I remember as my dad was a law enforcement officer, finding his guns and then playing with them as a kid, and he never knew that was going on. And shame on me for doing that, but that's what kids do, right? Keep it out of sight, out of mind. On the book front, let's talk about Saving Aziz. Very proud of my buddy Chad Robichaud. I did a Black Rifle Coffee podcast, a Fieldcraft podcast on Ukraine. His story of getting his buddy Aziz, who was a guy he operated in Joint Special Operations Command with. The story is great, but it's also tragic because we left so many people behind. Chad and his band of amazing human beings rescued 17,000 Afghans. We left a lot of people behind. I love the awareness this book brings because he's not holding back when it comes to the politics that are involved in this. And we should never forget the sacrifice that these Afghans and these American citizens we left behind have made for our country. And also never forget the mistakes we made that cost American lives, including 13 Americans that were killed during that terrorist explosion that killed these Marines. I think there was an Army guy. Man, what a tragic circumstance. We should never forget that. This book right now is available on Amazon. Pick it up. I talked to Chad in a Q&A session. It was really cool catching up with him and getting the chance to talk to Aziz. But it's important that we keep those messages out there because they're going to get suppressed. I mean, Chad Robichaud, when he dropped this book, started talking about politics, it got suppressed, which is important that we continue to spread the word and never forget that, leading up to election cycle especially. I'll be in Texas, Dallas, Texas this weekend at Gritter Sports, teaching a pistol course. Also, on March 4th, me, Andy Stumpf, and Jared Taylor from Black Rifle Coffee will be doing a leadership seminar in Dallas. Andy focuses his speech on leadership. I focus mine on entrepreneurship with Jared because we both learned a lot of hard lessons in running our companies and navigating marketing strategies, management strategies, the list goes on. But you guys can get access to that on fieldcraftsurvival.com and sign up. Come out, break bread with us, and spend the day with me, Andy Stumpf, and Jared Taylor. Today, if you're listening to this and it drops likely yesterday, the guys from the 777, 7 continents, 7 days, $7 million for Folds of Honor and charity. What an amazing tribute that these guys did. They did it in 6 days, 6 hours and 6 minutes. And they did it to raise awareness and also money for Gold Star families who have been left behind by their level in paying the ultimate sacrifice for a country. To see all these like civilians and these military guys go at each other and attack veterans who have served this country, it's disturbing. It's sad for me, but it's also human beings. I mean, we're just all screwed up, especially when people they don't realize they're being manipulated by social media. I mean, the same people who stand up and say, fight the system are being manipulated by the algorithm because they're being so emotional and so toxic about things they read on social media. Like, get off TikTok, man. Spend time with your family and go do things that are going to positively impact your community in your own backyard. Very proud of the 777 crew. They jumped in Florida as a tribute. We'll have Andy Stumpf on the podcast soon to talk about that amazing 7 jumps, 7 days for Folds of Honor. Also be talking to Jericho and Logan when they get home. Just so very proud of those guys. Also, lastly, I want to mention that we do have the Homestead 62 program. A lot of people have messaged me and said, hey, I didn't get to sign up for it in time. It's about 4 weeks in. If you missed signing up for Program 62, you could still sign up for it at fieldcraftsurvival.com. We will just catch you up with recorded versions of the things you missed. And then when you are caught up, you could do the live. If you want to miss all of them and get the entire recorded segment, you could do that as well. But it's our long-form 12-week academic program of all things preparedness. Not just the gun cool guy stuff, but first aid, mobility, the list goes on. Check it out at fieldcraftsurvival.com. I want to say I appreciate you guys. Thanks for tuning in to The Prep Life. Make sure you subscribe, hit the notification tab, and spread the word. Peace out, guys.